Okay, so now I would like to introduce our next speaker. Khalifa is a tech entrepreneur and runs a popular podcast. He serves as a board member for the Hoffman Kaufman Foundation as an advisor for the IDF on Palestinian affairs. His talk is entitled Antisemitism from a Druze Perspective. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you. Well, believe it or not, but I just remembered that the May 1st is a socialist holiday. And funny enough, and you will see the connection in a minute, I guess, but there's a saying in Arabic, a Palestinian say, that goes like that, مجنون يرمي حجر في البير 100 عاقل بدهم يطلعوه, which means that a crazy person will throw a stone in a well. You will need 100 sane people to pull it out. And in some point, this is what I'm trying to do, and probably all of you guys here, because sanity is scarce these days. And my crazy person is a guy named Bassem Youssef that claims that Palestinians can't be anti-Semitic. I will try to prove it that not just that they are anti-Semitic, but called stone Nazis, a big portion of them, at least, in Gaza. And I'm going to show you demonstrate a video that it just came to me yesterday. It's one of way too many anti-Semitic content. It's going to give us some perspective, and we'll continue from that. Thank you. Yeah, Birkenau Auschwitz.
من داخل المعتقلات لقيتوا اللي تخرجوا منها الصهاينة. الله يرحم كل الفلسطينيين ويرحم شهدائنا وفري فلسطين. وإن شاء الله بنتحرر منكم وبترجعوا للمعتقل أو بترجعوا لأرضكم وبترجعوا لأي مكان أنتوا فيه. المهم تطلعوا من عنا لأنه هاي أرضنا وانتو هان أصلكم من هان تخرجتوا من هاي معتقلات الغيتوا. تحيا فلسطين يحيا أبو عبيدة.
Abu Ubaida is the speaker of the Ezzeddin al-Qassam brigades, for those who doesn't know. So, good morning, distinguished guests. I wish I could be more fluent in English and speak freely, but I prepared a speech, so bear with me, of course. I'm deeply honored to stand before you at this esteemed institution. First, I express gratitude to my dear friend Brett Kaufman for organizing this event, and to the university to your warm hospitality. As a member of the Druze community, we appreciate your welcome, as the Druze people love a good welcome. When Brett invited me to speak tonight, I was truly thrilled, yet humbled. What value can I, as an individual, offer such an esteemed audience? Ideally, I would be here as an eager student seeking a wisdom and guidance. For institutions like this hold a sacred significance for us, akin to the revered academic legacy of Aristotle, whom we Druze regard as prophet. While my Druze heritage is a rich topic today, I want to address a more urgent matter. 4 years ago, I started a podcast to highlight a pressing threat to our lives. I offered my audience a thought experiment, asking them to imagine a history class 50 years from now, objectively discussing our current times. If we detach ourselves from the daily events and media narratives, it seems plausible that we are already in the brink of a world war. I urge you to consider the signs: rampant inflation, rising political extremism, persuasive instability, and a palpable sense of social decline. What are the odds of such catastrophic war reshaping global politics, economics, and well-being? 1%, 5%, or perhaps the 50% that Ray Dalio suggests. Moreover, we cannot ignore the rebirth of anti-Semitism. Jews are often considered to be the canary in the coal mine. When the world turns against Jews, bad things happen. In the last World War, anti-Semitism played significant role. Today, anti-Semitic rhetoric is not only heard in German, but also in Persian, Arabic, and even English. Often laced with Islamic references and fatwas. This new wave of anti-Semitic rhetoric has evolved into a new type of racism, which I call pro-Semitism. Pro-Semitism is the connection point between terror groups and activist groups here in campuses, pushing what Palestinians now name the University Intifada. Pro-Semitism combines the new woke socialist agenda with old-fashioned anti-Semitism, using the Palestinians' cause to push anti-Jewish and anti-Western liberal ideas. This type of racism and political discourse appeals to young students on campuses, offering no compromises. They chant, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," calling for democracy, but aiming for social justice. In their eyes, justice happens when the ethnic minority gains power over the perceived oppressors, resembled by the Jewish colonialist. Pro-Semitism camouflages hatred toward Jews by demonstrating unconditional love toward Palestinians, representing them as eternal victims of Jewish and white oppressions. This kind of racism refuses to acknowledge that while there are some bad Jews in the world, some of whom are very powerful and very bad, it doesn't mean that all Jews or Israelis are bad. Organizations like the BDS exemplify this type of discourse, attempting to categorize all Israelis in this manner. I agree with the protesters that power corrupts, and Israel and the United States have been intoxicated by their own power. However, as Malcolm X put it, powerlessness corrupts even more. And what is true to the Jews is also true for the Palestinians. Not all Palestinians are bad, and this is a truth we must also acknowledge. Before going any further, we need to consider whether Palestinians can be anti-Semitic in the first place. Some argue that the Palestinian agenda is not anti-Semitic, but rather just a just call for a nation's self-realization, and that the October 7th events were organized by freedom fighters pursuing liberation. This view is famously argued recently by Dr. Bassem Youssef, who controversially claims Palestinians are Semitic themselves. They can't be anti-Semitic, like a human, Homo sapien, can't be a homophobe. In the aftermath of October 7, numerous Arabs and Muslims lost their lives and were abducted, perceived as being on the wrong side of the ideological divide. Hamas, labeled as a terrorist organization by many countries, still holds hostages from those attacks, including Muslims. If Hamas, a prominent Palestinian political group, can harbor such prejudice toward Palestinians who happen to live in Israel, it is plausible they hold similar biases against Jews. Disturbingly, it is evident and became very clear that large numbers of Palestinians can indeed be anti-Semitic, with pure hatred towards Jews, driving people from their homes at that fateful morning towards the Gaza border settlement, Gazan civilians stormed through the fence and participated in the atrocities. However, this viewpoint glosses over the fundamental question: what is the true nature of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict? And why does this conflict have a significant impact on the entire world? Many Israelis view the conflict as a religious war between Islam and Judaism, but I disagree. While extremist groups like Hamas employ religious rhetoric to present themselves as messengers of true Islam, the conflict is between the Western liberal model of governance and Islamist ideas. These ideas, beside their religious aspect, hold at their core socialist and Marxist agenda that looks appealing to many young minds and hearts here in the West, as I would like to present with the Hamas case. Some in Israel argue that the concept of a civilized democratic state simply doesn't work in the Middle East, not with its enemies or in its tribal and religious atmosphere of the region. The problem in my eyes is that it's not a local story between Israel and the Palestinians, but a global threat to the individual basic freedom, such as freedom of speech and freedom of belief. This would have been Israel's problem to deal with, but now millions of Muslims immigrants who fled their failed states are imposing, with the help of leftist social movements, their own way of governance on Europe. If Israel falls, Europe is next. We must view anti-Semitism as a manifestation of social imbalance and a consequence of moral decay. In times of decline ethics, reason becomes scarce, facts lose relevance, and sense eludes the masses. These symptoms of social decline pose an increased threat to our age of social media and AI, providing fertile ground to the spread of misinformation among impressionable youth overwhelmed with content. It is crucial to recognize that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not merely a regional issue, but a broader ideological struggle with far-fetching implications. The rise of Islamist idea challenging Western liberal values threatens not only Israel, but also Europe and the rest of the democratic world. Addressing anti-Semitism and the spread of extremist ideologies require a concentrated effort to promote critical thinking, ethical reasoning, and a commitment to a truth in the face of disinformation. Ladies and gentlemen, I wouldn't be here tonight if I weren't convinced that the campuses have become a battleground as significant as the one in Gaza. The world is looking how the liberal authorities will deal with the protesters because it will determine the next stage of their social struggle towards their social justice. Sorry for that. Social justice that is a direct threat to all of us that believe in individual basic freedoms. This is a fight for what is right and what is wrong. And it's happening at the times where child kidnappers are glorified as freedom fighters. In times like these, universities and professors need to take action and combat anti-Semitism. Not just to defend the Jews, but to save us all. Anti-Semitism will not end if and if all Jews will to disappear. What starts with the Jews eventually affects everyone, as we witnessed on October 7th. Semitic anti-Semitism is a real phenomenon and an extremely popular belief among Arabs. Shockingly, as of today, Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler's infamous book influenced by the protocols of the Elders of Zion, the anti-Semitic and fake document that allegedly reveals the secret conspiracy that Jews plotted to overtake the world, is the #1 best-selling book in Egypt. Reflecting on these weighty issues compels me to share something more personal. I am Khalifa, an Israeli who has served in the IDF Special Forces, among other roles. But above all, I'm a father, a role that shapes my perspective and with concern for my child's future in a world where dangerous ideologies still thrive. It is this profound worry that drives my commitment to speak out and act. It may seem odd for me, someone not directly affected by antisemitism, to take the stage on this topic, yet my situation is uniquely complex. Some Jews may distrust me as seeming Palestinian, while some Palestinians resent me for seeming too Jewish. But the truth is, I am neither entirely one nor the other. I am both. This blend affords me a deep personal insight into both worlds, making my perspective vital. My decision to pursue meaningful military service crystallized after a powerful lesson from my Jewish teacher, who grew up in a family of Holocaust survivors who detailed the unspeakable horrors they faced. I realized then that the persecution beginning with Jews could easily extend to minorities like the Druze. Something in my young self just felt it in my bones. Today, we all discussing the tragic event of October 7th and the fallout it has brought on American universities. However, it is useful to recall another disturbing event that occurred 5 years prior in Syria. Armed Palestinians adhering to the ISIS ideology and operating from the Yarmouk refugee camp near Damascus were unusually granted safe passage by the Syrian regime to the Druze district of Suwaida. This Palestinian group was in active conflict with the Syrian government, yet they were allowed to carry out a brutal assault on the Druze community, who were targeted for refusing to serve in Bashar al-Assad's army, the same army fighting against those extremist groups. The stark contradiction allowed these militants to perform what later became known as the Suwaida massacre. For hours, these Islamist militants engaged in horrific acts of violence, kidnapping, raping, murdering, and torturing hundreds of unarmed Druze civilians who simply wished to live peacefully. To put this in perspective, for the 1 million people in Suwaida, the Suwaida massacre was 4 times the size of the Israeli tragedy on October 7. Semitic antisemitism is a real phenomenon, and its victims can be anybody that just doesn't seem right to the anti-Semitic mind. We call it here anti-Semitic, but what it's basically is just a pure racism and politics of hate. There are no simple lesser evil options in this battleground. The threat of Islamist terrorism is global. Groups like Hamas state their goal is to free Palestine from the river to the sea, but their ambitions extend far beyond. The ultimate objective is an Islamic state subjugating Jews, Christians, and all non-Muslims as second-class dhimmis under traditional rule. This goal spot is rooted in the Islamist belief that their faith will inevitably prevail over Western ideologies. As someone speaks in Hebrew, Arabic, and English, I find myself uniquely positioned, yet deeply frustrated. facts are overshadowed by manipulated emotions, reshaping the narrative to serve agendas. Groups like Gays for Gaza vocally advocate Palestinian causes without grasping the moral corruption they support, nor the fact that in Gaza, under Hamas, their liberty would be criminalized. Living in Israel feels like being encircled by fire, and after October 7, the threat intensified dangerously. I fear you in this audience may be impacted next. I agree with the protesters here in campuses as well. Palestinians do deserve a better life. If there's anything that became clear to me after October 7, it is that neither the Palestinians nor the Jews are going anywhere. They are both here to stay. Jews will not go back to Europe as the Palestinians dream, and the Palestinians won't flee to neighboring countries as many Jews wish. We need to find a way to coexist, but under American leadership, consumed by the faults of its own politics, both sides are doomed more suffering unless we change the policies of the United States in dealing with this problem. Thank you. To put it in simple terms, the United States policy regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict looks like a desperate attempt to plant a mango tree in order to get olive fruits. It is not going to happen. The United States and its corrupt arm, the UN, are trying to extinguish a fire using gasoline. Can you imagine Theodore Roosevelt commanding his troops to build civil infrastructure facilities in Nazi Germany while bombing Dresden? Clearly not. So why is the United States empowering Israel with the right hand, sending arms and funds, while endorsing Palestinians on the other hand? War is bad, an unfortunate outcome. To stop it, you need to have a winning side and a losing side. You should make a clear-cut decision, choose your ally, and decide whether you are with us or against us. This is what Iran does, and it's as simple as that. Since 2007, when Hamas came to power, I have closely studied Gaza as a compelling case study in social decline. Drawn to its compelling case study, the isolation, the small scale of the territory, and the nearly humongous population have provided a unique vantage point to examine how people manage in such continuous state of collapse. What choices do they have? How do they go about their daily lives, articulate their thoughts, and build their businesses? My fascination grew to such an extent that today, nearly all the news I consume is raw, unedited, and funneled through Telegram groups and channels originating from Gaza. You can only imagine my shock and horror. Imagine my shock and the horror I witnessed that morning. What I saw is the very reason I stand before you today, to convey the gravity and urgency of this situation. While I'll spare you the graphic details, as those belong to a different discussion, but that Brett highlighted briefly to provide context for us today, it is crucial to understand why October 7th is a pivotal moment, a significant turning point, a black swan event whose repercussions we will feel for years to come. Israel was founded on a solemn promise, never again, a vow that we reaffirm each year just before Independence Day, during our Holocaust Memorial Day observances. However, that blood-stained morning felt like a betrayal of this fundamental pledge. My approach to consuming media is direct and unedited, providing me with a raw glimpse into reality. This is why what I witnessed on October 7th morning was so profoundly unsettling, because indeed what happened that day and what is happening on American universities are directly linked. Drawing from Hannah Arendt's notion of the banality of evil, I define a Holocaust as an event where ordinary people commit horrendous acts. The Holocaust in Germany was largely performed by regular citizens, average common folks, not monsters with no horns or tails, but everyday people. Just like those involved in the events of October 7th were farmers, merchants, fishermen, and also UN officials partook in what could only be described as a terrifying carnival of death. The sheer excitement, the joy, and extreme happiness demonstrated by common-day people who wanted to take part of the action, as broadcasted live by news channels from Gaza, streaming unfiltered through Telegram channels, struck a chilling chord with me. It became clear to me in those moments that we were witnessing a Holocaust event. Now, as the war enters its 7th month, I find myself questioning why there hasn't been anarchy despite the displacements of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and the ongoing violence and the total destruction affecting every aspect of their lives. Why Hamas still popular among Palestinians, not only in Gaza, but in the West Bank as well? The answer, I believe, lies in the socialist nature of Hamas, which appeals to young students here in the US. Like the Nazis, Hamas is in its core a socialist movement with a strong hold on many institutions, providing services and shelters for numerous citizens. This allows Hamas to use civilian infrastructure like schools, kindergarten, and hospitals for its needs. Hamas officials, including teachers, imams, and public servants, number between 100 to 200,000 people and are deeply embedded in the society. The armed fighters, Kataib Izzuddin al-Qassam, are estimated to be between 35 to 40,000, are just the tip of the iceberg. Am I saying that all Gazans are legitimate terrorist targets and should be killed by Israel? Of course not. What I'm trying to say is that Hamas has engineered this huge number of Palestinian civilian casualties because they believe themselves to be judges of life and death, to sacrifice their own people for propaganda value to the West as part of their ideology. It is a feature planned and executed by Hamas by the orders of the Führer of Tehran. And further, the Palestinian people, by and large, choose and accept to pay this price, which put Israel between a rock and a hard place. How can you fight a nation that has no respect for life, that sanctifies death? We must be careful not to conflate Hamas with Islam itself. While they use religious rhetoric, they represent just one interpretation that the broader Islamic world rejects. Islam must be part of the solution, as extremism will only grow stronger with each success. We must teach terrorists that it's unacceptable to choose terror as legitimate means to undermine Western values. Leaders like Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed of the UAE are paving a new, enlightened path for their faith. They are aware of the danger posed by domestic extremists who look to Israel and observe how the United States treats its allies. The event of October 7 made the line between enemies and allies clear, but sadly not for the US, as evidenced by the situation in the college campuses. And the audience here. However, these reformers remain outnumbered by hateful ideologies, and the United States has not made their task easier by providing to be an unreliable ally to many partners in the Middle East, from the Kurds fighting ISIS and the debacle in Afghanistan, America's abandonment of its allies in their hours of need has been noted by the forces of evil. America must set principled standard for the world. Being a terrorist or an anti-Semite is never acceptable. There are only two paths: standing with those who wish to live with dignity, freedom, and human rights for all people, or siding with traders of hate and oppression, acknowledging a Palestinian state while being hostage to Hamas would only embolden terrorism, sowing further chaos rather than peace. Hamas campus allies make this challenging, as American students are being fed the narrative that Israel, a Western democracy, is the root of all evil. To conclude, the October 7th attack brought clarity to the Israel-Palestinian conflict, revealing the true nature of alliances and the strength of the Israeli society. It demonstrated that we cannot yield to extremist doctrines, as they pose a threat to all civilians caught under the brutal reality of Islamic terror. Antisemitism serves as a thermometer for the health of the society, and we all have a potential to become oppressors ourselves, as Nietzsche warned when he said, beware that when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster. For when you gaze into the abyss gazes also into you. While acknowledging Palestinians' right to live in dignity and peace, we must reject terror as a path of emancipation. The Palestinian cause appeals to Western youth who sympathize with the oppressed, but this victimhood sustains suffering. The aftermath of October 7th presents an opportunity to end the conflict and break the circle of violence, but it will require a lengthy healing process for both Palestinians and Israelis. As we move forward, the challenge lies in bringing doubt to the society that has none and fostering alternative political discourse that doesn't rely on violence and terror. Universities play a crucial role in this process, as they are responsible for educating and guiding the activist's mind. Activists that often choose sides like it was a football game, while the anticipation and excitement of having the underdog winning like it was an action movie they watch on Netflix. But it's not. Reality is much more complicated and nuanced than that. It is our responsibility, not just the academic institution, to promote understanding, tolerance, and productive discourse while addressing dangerous ideas like anti-Semitism. So please, if you find any of what I've mentioned before to be worth sharing with others, please do so. People should understand the true nature of this conflict. As for me, on a personal note, what really concerns me is the question that I don't have an answer to yet, but I treat it as my life's mission. The question remains, how can we plant the seed of doubt and encourage questioning of the status quo in a collectivist and totalitarian society like the one in Gaza? It is my understanding that the true change must come from within, as a critical mass of people start thinking beyond the main narrative. And with this question, I would like to leave you. How can we help the brainwashed extremists change their minds towards a more tolerant discourse, one that accepts Jews and Palestinians as equal human beings who deserve to live in peace? It is essential that we continue to search for ways to encourage critical thinking, empathy, and open-mindedness among both Palestinians and Israelis. This may involve supporting grassroots initiatives, facilitating dialogue between communities, and investing in education and youth programs that promote tolerance and understanding. Ultimately, the path to lasting peace and coexistence will require a fundamental shift in attitudes and a willingness to embrace our shared humanity. It is a daunting challenge, but one that we must confront head-on if we are to break the cycle of violence and hatred that has plagued this region for too long. As I conclude my speech, I urge each and every one of you to reflect on the role that you can play in fostering a more just, peaceful, and tolerant world. Together, we have the power to plant seeds of change and work towards a future where Israelis and Palestinians can live side by side in dignity, in respect, like they once did. Thank you very much.